so I'm going to begin. Mais si vous avez des questions en français à la fin, n'hésitez pas à les poser. Je peux répondre sans problème, j'espère. So the title of my presentation of our paper is Proficiency Development and FSL Teacher Education Programs. It's a case study specific to OISE. So I'll just go over a little bit the purpose of the paper. So the paper addresses the issue of offering proficiency development opportunities to FSL teacher candidates during their teacher education program. It was sort of a pilot project which came about as a result of the Ministry of Education, which was the impetus behind it. I'll go over the details. In 2007, 2008, extra monies were offered to accept a larger pool of candidates. So it really was a bit of a pilot that occurred at the last minute. The paper builds on existing research in the area of teacher candidates and language proficiency development, and the presentation we just heard was about linguistic portfolios, which is obviously a crucial aspect of proficiency development. We feel it's a novel project, a novel study, because it did allow us to sort of evaluate various ways that teacher education programs can attempt to meet the proficiency development needs of teacher candidates, as we did go through a rather large smorgasbord of attempts to support our candidates. I just go over the literature very quickly. So basically there was a shortage of teachers, particularly in French immersion, but also in core French at the elementary level in particular. And this continues. Obadia said the same thing. Majanovic completed a study in 1990 involving boards and faculties of education, and the study concluded that actually the lack of French as a second language teachers was due primarily to proficiency and not to a lack of availability of training. So I think that is rather crucial research. Lapkin, Swain, and Shapson emphasized the necessity of developing tests. And we do have a proficiency test at OISE at present. And this is an interesting one. I brought it in because although Fried has done a number of studies, the conclusion has been that those who are less orally proficient or who have gaps in their oral proficiency actually tend to make important gains in fluency with time spent abroad. This is the study I just want to really focus a little bit on, though I don't want to spend too much because I do think it's the most relevant to our paper. It's called Assessing Language Proficiency of FSL Teacher Candidates. What makes a successful candidate? So I mean, at OISE, this is a crucial question that we're always asking ourselves. And it looked at the success rate or the pass rate at the University of Ottawa, quite shockingly low at 25%. And of those 25 that actually passed the test, I fortunately passed the test, or I wouldn't be standing here today. Half of them were required to take a cours d'appoint, as it's called, or some kind of proficiency course. So that was quite interesting. The program is very similar to OISE. So it's 9 months in length, actually. I think they don't have an internship. We have what's called a 1-month internship. And they have courses pertaining to second language teaching and methodology, which are taught in French, same with OISE. And all the other courses pretty much are offered in English, which is the case at OISE. And 2 practicums are completed, one in the fall, one in the spring. So as I said, it is a very similar program. Their proficiency test was first developed in '94, and it consisted of a comprehension part, grammar knowledge, which include a closed test, which we also have as well, and an error correction section. Writing ability was evaluated based on a composition, and oral ability based on an interview. They had the greatest difficulty in the closed test and error correction exercise. The presentation previously spoke about grammar difficulties. This will reappear in my presentation. Also, interestingly enough, even though we're in Ottawa, the largest, of course, because of the offering of the Français program, primarily most of the candidates are actually Anglophones in the program, which is the case at OISE as well. So the conclusions of their study, just quickly, and I think are quite important, as they have bearing on what we also have discovered at OISE, and that is most important factor was time spent in a French environment, and this builds on the previous presentation. There was some correlation between amount of explicit grammar instruction received and success on the written portion test, but it was primarily at the elementary level, so there didn't seem to be any correlation at all between. So the article talks about too little, too late. No correlation between time spent studying French at university and test results. That's pretty depressing. A degree in French was not an indicator of success. And then there's the whole question, which we're struggling with at OISE too. Every year I ask, well, if you're teaching grade 4 or 3 core French, do you really need the same level of proficiency as if you were teaching grade 12? The reality in Ontario at this time is that the college provides the qualification, and the qualification details are that you are qualified to teach K to 12 core French extended or French immersion once you receive that certificate. So the idea is if you are qualified to teach FSL and you start in grade 4, that you can actually move to a grade 12, and then the expectation is that you should have the proficiency necessary to do so. So this is why Ottawa U has one proficiency test, and this is why OISE also has one proficiency test. So here's the context. Sorry, I'll go over it. It's quite a bit on one slide. So 2007, 2008, the Ministry of Education offered OISE, I actually wasn't there, additional funding to admit a higher number of students. And if statistics bear that out, 60 students were tested in 2006, 2007. That number increased to 130. So of course, the larger pool of applicant means that you may be looking at greater gaps in proficiency. Our test involves 3 parts. So we have an oral interview, as Ottawa U has, a listening and reading comprehension exercises, a closed test, we have no error correction, and a written passage. 75% is required on the 3 parts, so oral, comprehension, written. If you do not pass one of the 3 parts, you do not pass the test at all. 2006-2007, 60% of candidates were successful the first time around. A rewrite was offered in June, no proficiency course. Of those candidates, 47% successfully passed, so they must have undertaken something on their own. 2007-2008, the pass rate dropped to 45%. What happened is that 21 unsuccessful candidates opted to complete a spring proficiency course that was offered to them. They must have achieved at least 60% on all 3 parts to be eligible for this course. Another 6 candidates opted for the fall, and we'll see that of the 21 candidates in the spring, some of them also were in the fall course. So what happened then, these 16 students who were then enrolled in the fall course, of those 16 students, only 4 were successful. So our pass rate in December was 25%. That's after 2 proficiency courses. Well, I'll start crying now. So this is the instructor. I was not the instructor, so I interviewed the instructor to get her impressions of the proficiency courses, because she taught both the June and the fall courses. And she noted, she was quite, had quite strong opinions. She noted that in June, while both courses represented an extra load, that the June course was more intensive, and she felt that that was a benefit. So it was over 6 weeks with 2 6-hour sessions on Saturdays, and then 4-hour sessions during the week. The fall course was much more spread out. It was 4 hours a week, but it was interrupted by a 4-week practicum, which was not in French, because they were not entitled to do a French practicum first semester if they were in the proficiency course. She also noted that she thoroughly enjoyed the June proficiency course. She felt students had not started the BEd, so they were really focusing on proficiency development and not worrying about, oh, I have to pass the test. That's what I'm here for. That's the only thing I'm going to care about or worry about at this time. And so she felt that they arrived with a very positive attitude. They also were not juggling a full OISE timetable, so that was really important. And they'd only been unsuccessful one time. And the other thing she noted was that their proficiency varied quite a bit more, and she feels that that might have helped Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. For the fall course, students were disappointed to have to take this extra course. They were deemed to have huge gaps in metalinguistic knowledge. Oral communication was actually their weakest point, but that they had huge gaps in their writing. They were very judgmental of each other. They were anxious all the time. They wanted the instructor to teach to the test. So the feedback in June was very positive. We even had one student who actually returned in the fall, having thoroughly enjoyed the June proficiency course. So that was quite interesting. She was so pleased at what had happened in June. Sorry, I'm running out of time. The students in the fall, their impressions was that they expected the course to help them. Interesting is they identified writing as their strength and oral as their weakness, which is once again consistent with what we heard earlier. After the course, so that was before, they believed it had helped them, although having a 25% pass rate, unfortunately, the results don't agree with what they believed. They did find the grammar lessons helpful. They did feel that it helped some of their weaknesses. Some of them felt the course didn't address their weaknesses at all. And I think the course instructor had decided to have the students teach the grammar lessons, and the students would have preferred the instructor to do so. So just some interesting conclusions before I move on to a couple of other things that we tried, is that the test actually revealed that the students identified writing as a strength, but actually they did far better on the oral. They did very poorly on the writing. And they were less successful after having written a second time. Their results actually dropped. And you can see it just plummeted. So what we did is we then decided to do small group sessions, and we found this much more successful. It was 1.5 hours a week. It was with groups of 3 or 4 students. They knew the instructor. I was involved in this. They were asked to identify areas that they wished to work on. Emphasis was not only on both oral and written, but on metalinguistic knowledge. This was crucial. They felt very, very positive about this. They came away feeling like they'd made tremendous gains, notably in metalinguistic knowledge. Sorry, I really am jumping here. What happened as a result is we also offered this year a grammar and syntax for the FSL classroom course. It was a related studies course that was proposed by both of us to allow the candidates to both develop their metalinguistic knowledge of French as well as to understand positive and negative language transfers. The majority of the students in the program lacked the above understanding. That was our observation, and we thought that it would be very useful. It was actually offered to all students in the B.Ed program, so not just the students who had passed the proficiency test. So some were there to actually pass the proficiency test in April to take the AQ course. Some were there and were francophone, because francophones actually don't have metalinguistic knowledge often, nor do they understand L1, L2 transfers. So there were a number of francophones that were there for that reason. And then finally, you have those who wanted to actually understand how to better explain grammar points to students. So quickly, I found the atmosphere very positive. I emphasized critical thinking rather than, okay, I'm here to correct your grammar and spelling. I think that really helped. I'm not sure that I really had a significant impact, given it was 8 classes of 3.5 hours. But I did notice an improvement in the final assignment. We then have what's called an internship at the end, and we strongly encourage our students to do an internship in a French-speaking environment. However, only 8 of our students completed an internship in France in 2007, 2008, and that number dropped to 4 this year, probably due to the economic situation. We do not have measures in place at OISE, at least clear measures that I'm aware of, to allow our students to seek financial help to complete internships in France or in a French-speaking environment in Quebec. So I think we had 3 students in Quebec this year. So just for the last 3 minutes, I think I have to just emphasize the lessons learned and recommendations. So accepting students into programs who have not met proficiency requirements, and this is something I noted, leads to tension between candidates who are successful on the test and those who are not. And particularly between native expert speakers, somehow they group themselves, and non-native, less expert speakers, and it becomes a really, really poisonous environment. A reliable proficiency test is important, and this is crucial. A degree in French, and I've noted that, is not a reliable indicator of proficiency, as noted by Bayless and Vignola as well. I have students with honors French, who many of whom do not pass the proficiency test, or who make it in, and their proficiency, they do have glaring gaps. If students must rewrite the proficiency test, our experience has been that it should not be offered during the B.Ed year, that it should be offered in the spring or the summer. And intensive proficiency courses tend to work much more effectively. And not offering a proficiency course but offering a rewrite actually encourages, just like the portfolio linguistique, students to take their own initiative to build proficiency. We had in 2006-2007 a 47% pass rate on the rewrite without a proficiency course. So we actually had the same pass rate. And we had 3 students who were unsuccessful and who actually waited the year and worked on their proficiency, and then when they retook it, they passed. At present, just to note, we have a new proficiency test, a new proficiency test, but we offer neither proficiency courses nor rewrites. Do I agree with this or not? That's a whole other discussion. But our pass rate for the last 2 years has actually been 60%. Sorry, I sort of galloped through that. Je m'excuse.
Thank you. We have lots of time for questions.